So it's such a privilege to be with you this morning and just to share some of my thoughts and a bit of my journey with you. I cannot thank you enough for the blessing that you have all been and what you've enabled me in some way to be able to do. There'll be some of you who may know a bit of my story. There'll be some of you who don't. But James asked me to share this morning a bit how it's going at the vicarage and what I'm learning there. And very briefly, my story is that I was really overwhelmed by the refugee situation. There are 70 million people who are currently displaced from their homes due to war, and I found that an overwhelming number, and I can't do anything for 70 million people, but I thought, I could do something for 2. And it was on my heart for a long time to care for young refugees, and so to have a home in one of your vicarages has honestly been one of the greatest privileges of my life. And so with your love and your support, and Michael and James fought hard for this, and I'm so grateful to them. But I moved into James's old vicarage in April and welcomed 2 of the most incredible teenagers, Muslim, Syrian teenage boys, into my home. Couldn't get more different to me. And while I have to be a little sensitive as I share about their stories, let's just say they have both faced unimaginable trauma, challenge, and loss. Their stories are not unlike millions of others who've been displaced from their homes. And if you want to go and read about the depth of some of these stories, there's a book called The Lightless Sky by an Afghani refugee who made the journey when he was a teenager. And it's a beautiful book to really understand kind of what some of the journey that these people have been on. And they've lost family members, their homeland. They've lived most of their lives in the shadow of war. This is all before they're 18. One of them particularly has traveled for years, literally years, slept on the streets through snow-filled Calais winters, and he risked his life over 150 times to get across the channel. His stories include everything from finding himself in the top box of a car hoping to get to England a mere hour away, to being stuck there all the way to Italy. And when they walked through the front door in April, they came with them years and years of displacement, but war. They were young children when the war started. They can't remember peacetime. And while their journeys have been different, they've spent their childhoods in situations that no child should. They've crossed seas, they feared for their lives. And when they moved in, on their social care assessment, when they were asked, what do you want from your home? Their only answer was that it would be safe. Safe. That was it. And I had no idea what this journey of us living together would be like, none at all. But I was fully accepting that whoever these 2 young people were when they walked through the door, I would be there for them. Whoever they needed me to be, I was willing to commit to them for as long or as little they would need, and for as long or as a short time they would need me, regardless of what came my way. And I think as I've been reflecting on the last 6 months, the biggest lesson that I've learned and that I'm continuing to learn is how my home, but also my life, how our lives can be places and spaces of physical, relational, and emotional safety as people who face trauma and challenge go on their journey of healing and wholeness, and what that practically looks like in the everyday stuff of life, as our washing machine endlessly cycles, as the shoes build up by the front door. I had no idea how many shoes teenage boys have. And the snack cupboard that forever needs restocking. We create the physical spaces, the bedrooms, the chairs around the dining tables, but it's also our lives that are to be hospitable. People's experience when they interact with us and how it makes them feel, that is actually the greater hospitality, regardless of where we are, be it at the workplace, in the community, in a cafe, on the street. My favorite description of hospitality is that good hospitality is where people leave our presence feeling a little more themselves. Hospitality is that people leave our presence feeling a little more themselves. And I find this passage from Romans 12, particularly as it's translated in the Message, a real encouragement on this journey. And we'll dip in and out of it this morning as we look at being places and people of physical, relational, and emotional safety to those who have experienced their very different things to what we have. And I hope this will give you some practical pointers as well as some biblical precedent. There's a guy called Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who's one of the leading psychologists on trauma. And he says that our ability to hurt one another as humans is not outweighed by our ability to heal one another. And I find that an incredible statement, that despite the horrendous things that people have been through at the hands of other humans and how hopeless situations can seem, there is hope, because healing happens most often through the vessel of other humans. Dr. Lawrence Heller, another trauma specialist, says, like a sunflower turning towards the sun, we are wired as humans for connection, and that it's in healthy connection that we begin to find ourselves again. Connection is the remedy for healing trauma. But that process isn't linear, and it's certainly not quick. It's not quick for my boys. It's not quick for any of us. We've all in one way, shape or form suffered. We've all got scars and open wounds. We're all on a healing journey, and we all will be for the rest of our lives. It's the human narrative and condition. And so how we love in the midst of that, and how do we love those in the midst of that who have directly or indirectly suffered greatly at the hands of others? And what I want to share today is really how our lives, as this passage say, is to practice playing second fiddle to the melody of somebody else's life. How do we bring a harmony and a richness that enhances their journey? And how do we remain a constant friend, singing the tune of their truest selves back to them when they've forgotten how it goes? Because that, my friends, is the essence of a faith in action. And I do wonder sometimes why God chose to partner with us to do this, why he set up our faith and this story to be one of community and connection, why the greatest commandment is to love him and love our neighbors when he could just as easily have done it any other way, through a hologram or an audible voice that just comes through our pinky and our thumb. He could have been far more obvious. It was a risky strategy, choosing humans to be the presence carriers, especially considering our human propensity to hurt one another. But just as a pipe can be a carrier of clean water or a carrier of sewage, regardless, a pipe is still the best placed piece of equipment to move liquid from one place to another. And yes, as humans, we are the most dangerous thing on the planet to one another. Yet Jesus looks at us and says, you are also the best placed vessel for bringing healing. God knew that the abstractness of love can only truly be felt as the destructor of shame and fear and pain in the concrete reality of humanity. And we mustn't underestimate the role that we play in this. And thankfully, Jesus knew that this reality would be played out in the everyday in and outs of life, in the tiny, small moments, not grand gestures, but everyday presence and proximity as we care for others. And so for the rest of this morning, I want to take you through a really practical acronym from the word care that I believe is the soil within which others can grow. We're going to look at a C, an A, an R, and an E. Hopefully be really easy to remember, and you can take it into your everyday. Psychology and science would tell us that this is part of a trauma-informed approach, but we can call it by its other great name, love. So C is for consistency. How do we be stable, consistent presences? Consistency is the quality of behaving in the same way. And often those who've experienced instability and inconsistency in their lives are deeply traumatized by that. And forming trust for them can be really, really hard. But trust is a key component on the healing journey. Consistency is like an anchor for when someone is feeling all over the place. Consistency, despite emotional turbulence, is a bedrock for trust. And we get to be that consistent presence, that when somebody is with us, that they know what they're going to get. And I'm sure at all points in our lives where we felt threatened emotionally, we have to a greater or lesser degree had to find ways to cope. Some of which of those are difficult for those who are around us who just want to help. Be it angry outbursts, pushing people away, paranoid thoughts, isolation, turning to substances to cope. And I don't want to stereotype at all because it's very different for different people. But everybody has survival strategies for when they're in pain that we subconsciously employ. And it's hard. It's really hard for us, those around us. Verse 9 implores us to love from the center of who we are and not to fake it, to run for dear life from evil and hold to dear life to good. And then temptation, when we're faced with behaviors that are hard for us to understand as they're coming at us from people that we know and people that we love who are in deep pain, is that we can take offense or we can see it personally and take it personally. Or we can mirror the behavior back to us that's coming. You isolate me, I'll isolate you. You shout at me, I'll shout at you. But we need to be rooted and anchored in the center of who we are, not lose sight of the situation for what it is, to know and own our own identities so that we can show up in that person's pain on their good days and bad days with the same consistent calmness and peace and understanding. It's not easy to do, but it does lead us on to our A, accessibility. One of the most commonly used phrases when you ask someone how they are is, I'm tired and I'm busy. I'm guilty of it. We glorify the grind in our culture. Busyness and tiredness is something to be respected, but it really is the antithesis to loving people well. Time is the most precious commodity in our culture today, but I'm convinced, so convinced, that God is ready to use anyone who will be interruptible, available, and accessible. But how do we live our lives with enough margin that we can be interruptible without becoming resentful or overstretching our boundaries? In the summer, some friends and I went down to Cornwall and we went on a hike to find a particular cave. And we were walking down the beautiful Cornish coast path and we kept asking people if we were heading in the right direction because it wasn't on the map. And they were like, you are, but just be aware, around that corner, it gets really, really narrow, so just be careful. And all along the path was wide and we were laughing and joking and watching the seals, enjoying the view. We had enough space, but as we got to this point, this side of this path literally plummeted into the sea. And suddenly, the laughing and joking stopped. And it was all about concentrating and surviving. Our heads were down. We were solely focused on what we were doing so that we didn't plummet over the edge. And that's what living life without margin does to us. You know, how do we take a step back from the edge to give ourselves that space? Because you can't live on the edge forever. The edge is the destination for burnout. When we're always walking so closely, we can't take space to breathe and actually enjoy the journey. And verse 3 says to us, don't burn out. Keep yourselves fueled and aflame. And I love this. Be alert servants of the Master. Alert servants of Jesus. You know how quickly it is that we can forget to keep the main thing of loving God and loving our neighbor when the pressures around us get too great, when we get further and further to the edge. We need to be alert when we overcommit our diaries or our finances and our relationships so that we can bring it back actually to what's important. There is nothing wrong that when we are at the edge, we will all get to the edge at some points in our lives. So actually, sometimes we do have to just hunker down and focus. But we can't live there. We can't live our lives there without some space and margin. Otherwise, there is no space for others to come into that. With margin, we can be interrupted. We do have time. And this stuff can be hard, and we've got to look after ourselves. But if we can live our lives with the edge as the minimum rather than the norm, if we can keep ourselves a fuel and aflamed, those who are suffering know we will be there and that they can come to us. Because shame will stop them from opening up. The shame of, I don't think that that person has time for me, just fuels the feeling of isolation and worthlessness. So far we've had consistency, being a consistent anchor, accessibility, being available as and when people need us, and living our lives with margin. And so we come on to R, reliability, the next letter in our acronym. To do what we say we'll do. It's another foundation of trust. When someone trusts us with the vulnerable parts of their life and story, what we do with that matters. Can we be trusted not to share with others what we've been asked not to? Can we send that message, the text message, when we say we'll do so, or make that phone call? Are we there when we say that we'll be there? Can we honor the commitments that we've made? And actually, have we been honest with ourselves, not only about what we can do, but what we can't do? Is our yes, yes, but also is our no, no? Because we cannot do everything for everybody. That is a surefire way to burn out. But knowing what we can do and committing to that is so important as we help people on this journey. And then lastly, E, emotional connection. In verse 14, Paul encourages us to laugh with your happy friends when they're happy, share tears when they're down, get along with everyone, get along with each other, don't be stuck up, make friends with nobodies, don't be the great somebody. I love that just a couple of thousand years ago, Paul is writing the script of lives that are filled with empathy. There's a great social researcher called Brené Brown, who you may have come across at some point, speaks very profoundly on issues of vulnerability and shame. And she says, empathy has no script. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting, and communicating that incredibly healing message of, you're not alone. To know that we are not alone is shame-shattering to the core. Because shame will say to us, you're bad, you're too broken, you're too far gone, there's no hope for you. But empathy says, I'm here and you're not alone. And it's not necessarily about putting ourselves in other shoes. It's about connecting with the deep part of ourselves that know the human feelings. The thing is, we'll never truly know what someone's going through. Everyone experiences their world and their situation and their trauma differently, dependent on so many things, be it culture, experience, upbringing, personality. And we can sometimes shy away from stepping into people's pain because we think, how can I be there when I've never experienced what that person's going through? But we can connect with the parts of ourselves that know that feeling. I will never know the depth of what my boys have suffered. And I can't pretend to. I will never know what it is to be a Muslim Syrian teenager who's had to leave their home, their family, war. I will never know what that's like. But in my life, I can point to some moments where I've been really scared. And I can connect to that part of my experience as I talk to them. And that creates so much ground in me for compassion, for understanding, for empathy, for love. It helps me to see that people are more than the things that they have suffered. And it just Paul encourages us to just discover the beauty in everyone. So there we have it, how to care. Consistency, a consistent presence and anchor in someone's emotional storm. accessibility, creating space in our lives to be interruptible and available, reliable, letting our yes be yes and our no be no, and emotional connection. I'm here, you're not alone. We are all journeying through this world as wounded healers, as Henry Nouwen calls it. And that's part of the beauty of being everyday, bashed up vessels, vases, as Paul calls us. We've all got something to give and something to receive, something to learn and something to offer. And in a lot of evangelical Christianity, we're always encouraged to go do great things for God, go big or go home. Whereas I really think Jesus, and this passage particularly, encouraged us just to go small and go home. Chapter 12 of this Romans passage says, this is what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work life, and walking around life and place it before God as an offering. One of Mother Teresa's quotes is that not all of us can do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. And what would it look like if we were all a people who cared, who took everyday small moments and just loved with great love? One of my other hats that I wear, my job that I get paid to do, is that I work for an organisation called Safe Families, where we come alongside hurting parents who are going through a challenging time. And we work alongside people in communities just like you who will go and love families like this. And I've been doing this job for 5 years, and I can honestly say I have seen the power of consistency, accessibility, reliability, and emotional connection in the life-changing, transforming power of families who have been deeply traumatized. It's incredible. I've seen it so often. And you may be sat there and in your head, you may be thinking about the people in your life who are like, oh, actually, I needed to hear that this morning. I needed to be reminded of how to care. But you may be sat there going, oh, I feel like I could give this, I could offer this, but I don't know how. I actually don't have somebody in my life I could do that with. If you want to come and talk to me after about what it could look like to do what I do and have a young refugee in your home, I would love to talk to you about that. If you would like to just come and chat to me about how you could come alongside a hurting parent in the community, come and find me and talk to me about that, because I truly believe that this is something just so ingrained and deep within our faith, but yet so simple. And it's not without sacrifice, don't get me wrong. But you will never come more alive in your faith than when you are with people who are deeply suffering, because I know Jesus doesn't have favorites, but he really loves the marginalized. He really loves those who are hurting, and he's choosing to partner with us to do that. So thank you so much for just helping me continue what I'm doing at the house. Thank you for ways that you've loved. You guys have bought some bikes for my boys. And there's lovely Mary, who every month, without fail, drops chocolate on our doorstep and is affectionately termed as the chocolate lady in our house. But do you know what? Even that is just lovely. The boys get so excited. They come through the door. It's like, the chocolate lady has been. And it's just precious, those precious little things that actually they really see that you guys care. And I just thank you so much. So just shall we pray as we just finish this morning? Lord Jesus, I thank you for the incredible privilege that it is that you would choose to use us, that we would be your primary vessels to help others heal. And Jesus, as we think about those in our life who are facing challenge and trauma and difficulty, as we learn to be present with them in the midst of it, would you help us to care? Would you help us to look deep within ourselves, figure out what our stuff is, that we can put it to one side, embrace it as who we are, and just go into the world and love people differently, no matter the background, no matter the situation, no matter where they've come from. And we just pray for every person, every refugee, every asylum seeker who, all 70 million of them, who just don't currently have a home. Father, that you would be with them, that your peace would be present with them, and that, Jesus, they would find their healing in the connection of others. In your precious name. Amen.